Hello, hello everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to our Hydro Station live experience today. Today we're going to be talking about protecting our watersheds. Now this live event is brought to you by so many friends and partners out there that I just want to give a quick shout out. So first of all, I want to give a quick shout out to our friends at Sweetwater Authority and also our friends at Otay Water District who helped bring this live experience to you. Now, my name is Mrs Bystrak, and I'm an employee with this Chula Vista Elementary School District, where I teach at a place called the Hydro Station. The Hydro Station is a makerspace classroom located right here in Chula Vista on a desalination facility, so in a working water treatment facility. Now, as we go through today's live experience, there's many different ways that each of you can participate. For starters, today, we're going to be doing two different types of builds. So we're actually going to be building models of watersheds. So that's one way you can participate. Another way you can participate is to join in the conversation in our question and answer section. So I have my friends Mr. Garcia from the Innovation Station and Mr. Bruder who are there monitoring and answering and responding to some of your questions or some of your comments as well. So if you write something in there, there's a possibility you might be speaking about what you're saying in that Q&A. And finally, make sure you stick around all the way to the end so that you can participate in our live Kahoot. So at the end, we're going to quiz you, test your knowledge on watersheds with a live Kahoot. Now today we're going to break it down into kind of three sections here about protecting our watersheds. Today we're going to learn all about watersheds. We're going to create a model of a watershed and observe how human actions actually impact our watershed. And finally, we're going to identify what we can do to help protect our watersheds. So maybe by the end of this, you'll become a watershed guardian. Now, you just heard me say the word watershed maybe 20 times in the last 2 minutes. So before we move forward, let's take a moment to find out what a watershed actually is. So let's go ahead and start this video, find out what is a watershed.
What are you always in, no matter where you are standing? No matter where you live and how much or how little water is nearby, you live in a watershed. A watershed is an area of land that drains into a river, stream, or lake. It includes everything within its borders: all the land, air, plants, animals, mountains, deserts, cities, farms, and even people, their stories and traditions.
So I really loved how cartoons can demonstrate for us, or those kinds of drawings can really define what things are for us. So just looking at that video, we just found out that a watershed is an area of land that drains into a river, a stream, or a lake. So it's not just the ocean, it's not just surface water, it's actually that whole area of land where all that water might be draining from. Now, as far as examples, you can see watersheds portrayed in many different ways. You may see something like you see right here on the left as an example. This is a map showing the Sweetwater River watershed. And so you might see maps or graphs showing those different watersheds, so areas of land. Also, it's nice to see a drawing or a sketch of those as well to give us an understanding about watersheds. And finally, if you're looking out, maybe when you're driving around at your car window or looking out to the mountains or just looking around your area around you, we heard that we all live in a watershed. So you can also just look out and know, hey, that's part of the watershed. Now, some more characteristics about watershed that they mention, it says that a watershed includes everything within its borders, including the land, the air, the plants, the mountains, deserts, cities, and farms. So everything on that land is included within that watershed. Now, as for some non-examples or things that do not describe a watershed, remember, a watershed isn't merely that body of water that is collecting. So it's not just a lake or not just a river. And it's definitely not a shed that holds water. So we want to remember, a watershed is that land that drains into a river, stream, or lake. Now, late last night, I heard some rain pounding on my roof, and so I heard it. It doesn't happen very often here in San Diego County, but when you are looking at the rain, and when I'm looking at the rain, one of the things I'm always thinking about is I see puddles and I see water, and I often wonder to myself, where does all that water go? So if you see this picture on the right here, you see water flowing. It looks like it's going down kind of the drains or that curb area there, and it's shedding or flowing or moving to some other location. I always wonder, where does that end up? Where does it go? So to help us understand that, I want to send you on a journey through a video with a cartoon of a raindrop and his journey of what happens after he falls from the sky. Well, what an adventure that little raindrop went on. Kind of reminds me of that feeling when you're starting to go on a roller coaster and you go through that ride and that journey, and then you end up and you're like, whoa, I don't feel so great. So that was an image or a video showing you a little bit about the journey of a raindrop, one particular raindrop. But raindrops can fall in many different areas along our watershed. So I have a first question for you. Now that you've had some background information about watersheds, I want you to think about, we have some good evidence right now because it's been raining here in our local area. I want you to think and answer in our Q&A section. I want you to think about the water that comes from the sky, that rain, that precipitation. Where do you think it sheds to? Where do you think it goes after it's running away either from your house, your curbs, and things like that? So in our Q&A, go ahead and share your answers with us. Now, to get started, I know you guys are ready to build. I love building and making things with you. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start with our first model of a watershed to help us understand a little bit more about the concept and the ideas. And while we're making this watershed, we really want to think about observing and thinking and asking questions to ourselves to be able to figure out what we're noticing. All right, let me go ahead and switch cameras. So for this next section, oops, actually, I forgot to show you the materials that you're going to need. So let me go ahead and go back here. For this first part, what you're going to need is you're going to need something like a large tray. I'm just using a container top, so I'm going to use that. You'll need a sheet of paper. You'll need maybe 1 or 2 washable markers. You'll need a spray bottle that's full of water. And if you happen to have it, you'll need some tape. Now, if you need some time to gather those materials, you can always press pause during our live event and come back and join us and catch up with our model making here. But for those of you that have your materials and your supplies ready, I'm going to go ahead and switch screens here so that we can go ahead and make our first model of a watershed. All right, so what you should have in front of you is your sheet of paper. And with that sheet of paper, what you're going to do is you're just going to lightly crumple it. So you're going to lightly crumple it, just like this. All right? So go ahead and crumple up that sheet of paper. And you're not going to lay it flat. You're going to keep it slightly crumpled. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tape down this sheet of paper. Again, I'm not going to lay it down flat. Ah, I forgot to tell you, you can do this alongside me, all right? So again, if I go too fast, you can always pause it. But please go ahead and join me as I make my model as well.
Hey, Mrs. Bystrak.
Yes, Mr.
Would
Bruder.
we be able to see that on your document camera so we can see how you're coloring that in?
Oh, sure. Yes, I'm sorry. It looks like, let me see if the camera, give me just one moment here. It looks like the view was not sharing. And let's try that again.
There we go. Perfect.
You can see it now, Mr. Bruder. All right. Thank you. Thank you for noticing that. All right. So what I just did, if you weren't able to see it, since I wasn't holding it up, is I am able to just go ahead and crumple my paper, keep it nice and loose. What we're building right now is a model of what land might look like from above. So we have some higher elevation, some lower elevation. Now to highlight that a little bit better, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to take my marker, and any of those high ridges, those might be like symbolic of mountains or hills. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to just put my marker on top of those. I'm going to follow those lines. I'm going to follow those creases to start creating what looks like a topographical map. All right, so I'm going to keep on doing that. You can be doing yours as well. If you want to switch color markers, you can go ahead and do that as well. In a moment, we're going to be observing what happens when it rains. So we're going to add rain to this model, and we're going to see what happens to those colors to help us identify which way water flows. All right, so it looks like I'm getting close to filling in all my creases here. Maybe you are as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and cover that up. Now, like I said, there's some higher elevation. Remember, this is like that bird's eye view, looking as if you were in an airplane looking down at our land. Now, what you're going to do next is you're going to make it rain. So you're going to go ahead, get your spray bottle, and I want you to just saturate that sheet of paper. Now, as you do that, I want you to pay close attention. Check out that marker and check out where the water is flowing and kind of dragging that color. I can see, for instance, here, this is an area that looks like it might be something like a river or a stream, right? I can see water all starting to pool in one area or shed off into one area. Maybe this section here, I see a lot of water pooling right here. It's pretty purple coming from this maybe mountain ridge here or this area of land. Maybe that's a lake or some sort of pond that is forming. So water is gathering there more often. All right, so this map is here, or this, what we just built, this model is here to help us think about which way does the water flow. Is it going up above the mountain? It's not, right? So it's actually flowing or shedding down into different areas. Now, people like engineers and watershed scientists have to pay attention to this, even GIS specialists, some different careers where they're paying attention to see where that water flows. Because what if we had a house down here? That wouldn't be a great thing to have that water flowing down, right? Well, that was our first model. So thank you for joining in with me there. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to switch cameras here. And we'll get a little bit more information before we do our second build.
Mrs. Bystrak?
Yes.
If I could just interrupt real quick. We are able to see your slides, but we'd love to see you too, but we're not able to see you on camera.
Okay, let me see here. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. I think it had something to do with my document camera, but I think it is coming back now.
Perfect. In the meantime, we're getting some great responses about that question you asked about where does your water shed? Oh, great, great. Let's hear some of those. I would have to say a lot of them have said that they believe that their water sheds to the ocean. Zach and Gina and Alana and a few others shared that. We also had a few students who shared that it may end up in the bay as well. Ah, my goodness, you guys are so brilliant. Oops, sorry about that. I dropped our model right now.
So I'm hearing that it sounds like you're talking about a lot of the watersheds here in our local area are going towards our San Diego Bay or the ocean, which is exactly what I wanted to show you next right here. So in these two slides, what you're seeing are, on the left-hand side, you're seeing a map, which is very similar to the model that you just created. Now, San Diego County has 11 different watersheds. And one watershed that's pretty close to us is this Sweetwater River watershed. And just like our friends out there mentioned, that watershed's out to San Diego Bay. So this little area that's circled here actually looks like this. So if you've ever gone out to the snow in that Julian area, that would be like that high elevation area of our watershed. And it kind of runs down, stops at Loveland Reservoir, then down to Sweetwater Reservoir, and then through our city, through our area, and then it can shed out into the San Diego Bay. So you can kind of see that. That's awesome that you were able to recognize that a lot of our water does shed out into the ocean as well, which is what these arrows are showing. All 11 of those watersheds actually do go in a westward flow out to the ocean. So awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Mr. Bruder. Now, what we just did when we made that first model is we were taking on a task or the role of a watershed caretaker. Now, watershed caretakers are people who monitor and assist with either activities or make different decisions of things along our watershed. So in particular here, you're seeing a watershed caretaker in action at work, making decisions about some area of land that they need to work on around this particular reservoir or where our water may come from. So these watershed caretakers might maintain water treatment facility operations, but they also do a lot of data testing and take water samples. So there's a lot of science and work behind it as well. So that's pretty cool. You just took on one of those tasks as a watershed caretaker. Now let's move to our second part here. Now I want to change the flow here, showing you some images. I see 3 different pictures here. And I want to ask you, again, you can share your responses in that Q&A or share any comments that you have. Take a look at these pictures and tell me, what do you see? What are some of the images that you see? I see our friend, that little raindrop going down to that river, down that gutter. I also see lots of plastic all kind of piled up in a certain area. And I'm also noticing this sign here in one of our local beaches in Imperial Beach saying that we need to keep out of the water because it's contaminated. So I want you to start thinking about, how do you think this happens? Many of you already talked about how our water flows towards the ocean. So how do you think this happens? And then finally, I want to know, I want you to share in that Q&A, how do these images make you feel? Now with that, to understand a little bit more about some of those images you just saw, we're going to build another watershed. So for this second part, for our second build, you're still going to need that tray that you used before and all those other materials like a marker, a spray bottle, the tape. But this time, we're going to add items like some different containers. So I have some recycled containers that I have been using. I'm going to pause here for just a moment as you gather those materials. Just want to double check with Mr. Bruder. Mr. Bruder, are you able to see me on camera?
Hey, Mrs. Bystrak, right now we see your slides and so I think right now we're gathering all our materials, and that's the slide that we see up.
Okay, I'm just curious because I don't see my camera light on, so I just wanted, if I hold up things, I'm going to actually switch to the dot cam then, so that our friends are able to see the visual of some of the materials.
That would be perfect.
Are we able to see those? Okay, there's something going strange with my camera right now. So like I was saying, for this activity, you're going to be using maybe some recycled materials, maybe cups or jars. You maybe need 5 or 6 of them, so different sizes, so you can grab those. All right, let me go ahead and bring my tray over here, and let me show you how we're going to construct this model of a watershed. So here we go. I have a larger container here. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to place these containers in different areas. Now what these are going to do is eventually we're going to cover up these different containers. We're going to cover them up so that we're going to create our higher elevation and lower elevation parts of our watershed. All right, so I'm going to spread those out. You can do the same. Now I'm going to go ahead and take a sheet of foil. Now some of you may not have foil, so you could use a trash bag, you can use a plastic bag, you can use maybe some saran wrap. But I'm going to go ahead, it's going to get a little noisy with this foil, so I'm going to go ahead and cover up my containers. All right, here's my foil. Now I'm going to go ahead and push it down so that I can kind of see those different ridges and valleys creating my watershed. All right. I'm going to also add a second sheet just to cover it up a little bit more. And again, I'm going to push down on the foil, make sure those containers are completely covered. Now with yours, if you remember how the water was flowing, and with our first model, you saw water flow down. So if you think you can make some bigger lakes or some bigger streams, or you want to kind of start guessing where that water is going to flow, go ahead and do that. All right, now that I have this set up, I'm going to go ahead and add some of those natural features that we have in our area. Now I have some different items that I happen to have around my house, but for some of you out there, I asked you to make sure you had a sheet of paper. What you can do to improvise, because you probably won't have the supplies that I have, is when I mention something, take a sheet of paper, crumple it into a little ball, and then you can go ahead and color it with your marker. Now what that's going to do is you're going to see that marker run when we make it rain. So it'll give you an idea in this model of how things are working. All right, so just I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to color it in, and then I will tape it on. So let me show you what we're going to do with those. So I'm adding some natural features. So I know in some of those pictures of watersheds, I saw that there's some natural, plants and grass and trees. So let me go ahead and add that up here in my mountainous region. I'm going to hold on a second. Let me see if I can focus this. All right. Hopefully that won't move again. All right. Also, in our land, we also have things like dirt. So I'm just going to sprinkle, some of that dirt or the soil, the terrain that we have in our area. Again, since you don't have some of these materials, you can use that little sheet of paper and you can start coloring them, taping them to various areas. So I'll show you an example there. So maybe I want to put something there to represent either those plants or the soil or something like that. All right, let me think about what else we have. Let me add, I actually have some cocoa powder here or some hot chocolate. So I'm going to add a little bit more just to, when we make it rain, we can see a little bit more about where this soil might go. So I'm going to go ahead and pour that over. Now those are some natural things in those surroundings before we build cities and factories and things like that. So let's think about some of the human impacts that could be on our watershed. Now for one, many of you might have some pets or something, right? So I grabbed some Monopoly pieces here to represent those pets. So you might have a dog, you might have a cat, things like that. Now when those animals go to the bathroom outside, that gives us a little bit of waste. So I'm going to add a little bit of waste to these household animals and pets. We also live in cities or in communities. So I'm going to add some housing developments here. Along with, I'm going to add a little bit more chocolate powder, some of the waste that might come from those houses, maybe some trash or things they might have. Now, oftentimes when I'm walking around the streets here, I see pieces of plastic or paper or trash in my community. So I'm going to use some glitter to kind of represent that trash that we might see around that maybe hasn't made it to a proper trash can or something yet. So I'm going to go ahead and add those as well. Other things that might affect our watershed, we have things like animals out in their natural habitats. So I'm going to have this little ducky represent that. So this little duck might be downstream. So there's waste that could be caused from those animals as well, even from farms, factories, and all of those different things that we do. So now that we have our watershed model set up, I'm going to go ahead and ask you guys to make it rain. So just like before, you are going to go ahead and saturate your model. And again, pay attention to what happens. So remember some of those images we saw when we were thinking about how do those make us feel, or what is it, or how does that happen? Let's see if this model can help us explain that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and spray. I actually added some food coloring to my water today so that I could, you could see the water flowing. So you're starting to see things flow downstream. We have our higher elevations. It looks like they're all starting to move down. So let's take a moment. You guys were working on your model. I'm working on mine. It looks like up in this mountainous area, I'm seeing that water flowing, and it looks like it's going down to some sort of basin, which could be an ocean, it could be a lake. But what do you notice is also in that water? I'm wondering what some of you are thinking out there. I'm wondering what you're noticing. As you're experimenting here, why don't you go ahead and add some of those comments or things that are happening with your models into the Q&A. Now, as you're doing that, I'm going to pause for just a moment. I'm going to see if we are able to switch back to a camera view. So give me just one moment here. Let's see if we can switch. And I'm going to switch back to this PowerPoint here so we can talk a little bit about what we just saw. So in that model of your watershed, you were able to see all of that pollution, all of those different human impacts, things that we do go in and impact or join in that shedding of water. It was all moving to some other area. So what you're seeing here in this PowerPoint, just like we demonstrated with our models today, you're actually seeing, there are pollution from being residents here. You're seeing pollution from fertilizers, industrial pollution, all of those different things. So those are all things that we can find out can affect our watersheds. So with that, with the knowledge that you have and the things that you just saw, I want to ask you, what do you think you could do to protect the watershed? And this is something I would love to be able to share with Mr. Bruder in just a few minutes. So please think about what you just saw. Think about the different impacts that humans have. Go ahead and think about those things and write them down in the Q&A. Tell me just one thing. What is one thing that you could do to protect your watershed? Now, as you're doing that, thinking about it, I want to highlight one more career that has to do with this field of working with watersheds, because there's this career called a Watershed Scientist, and that's the role you just took on. You were investigating, you were watching, you were observing. So let's check out what this Watershed Scientist does in her career to make a difference and help protect our watersheds.
I also collect water samples and bring them to a laboratory where chemists look at pollutants in the water. This helps us understand what's washing into our streams as runoff when it rains. We've been building ponds, wetlands, and rain gardens to help clean that water. The samples I take help us understand which types are working the best. You might like this job if you like being outside, enjoy subjects like biology, geology, chemistry, and math, and if you have a curiosity to understand how things work. I spend about half of my time outside. The other half I spend planning studies, analyzing data, and working with people who use the data. What I like most about my job is that I'm helping to answer questions that lead to real changes. After I analyze my results, I present them to the people who make decisions about how the city grows and functions, and it's really rewarding to see positive changes happening because of my work.
All right. So it's pretty cool. In her career, everything she's doing is helping affect those different decisions that people are making, whether it's engineers figuring out where to divert water or where we are being able to test to make sure we have clean water. So it's pretty cool what she's doing. So at this time, Mr. Bruder, actually, before I ask you some questions of what our friends put in the chat or our Q&A, I want you guys to know it's time for our Kahoot. So you're probably still working with your models, you're taking in all this information. We got to find out a little bit about what affects our watershed. So let's test our knowledge now. So what I'm going to ask you to do is in a separate window, not a tab, so in a separate window so that you can see both my screen and your Kahoot screen, I want you to go ahead and go to www.kahootit and go ahead and enter the game pin 93980. Again, the game pin is going to be 93980. Now, as you're doing that, my friend Mr. Garcia is going to go ahead and add that pin into the chat, and I will go ahead and I will open up our Kahoot, and then I'm going to ask or invite Mr. Bruder. I would love to hear Mr. Bruder about some of those things that our friends out there said they could do to help protect our watersheds. I bet there's so many cool ideas out there.
You know, Mrs. Bystrak, there really are, and we have some great things that they shared as far as their observations in those images that you saw earlier.
Oh,
about,
cool.
you know, what did they see, what did they think happens, and how these images made them feel. And I have to tell you, a lot of our viewers shared about the emotions that came out and how sad it made them to see what we've done to our environment.
Exactly right. It seems like it comes down to single decisions that we make, right, that we can do. That's why I love to ask, like, what is one thing that some of you can do? I know the hard thing for me with those pictures is that those pictures are local. So those are very close to each and every one of us within a few miles of the Chula Vista area. So it's not a problem that's happening far away. It's something that's happening very close to all of us.
But you know what I think the great thing is?
The cool thing is we have an opportunity to do something about that, right? We can impact things in positive ways as well.
You totally read my mind, Mrs. Bystrak. I was going to say the same exact thing. You know, we did have one.
We have to think back to our friend in that cartoon, that little Raindrop, right? He wasn't feeling so well after he made it to the river with all that pollution.
We did have one question, if you could clarify for us before we share anything else. Is Lorelei was wondering, what does contaminated mean? So
contaminated. So we want to make sure that things are free from any kind of harmful either chemicals, which could be like oil from your car. So imagine if you have pure water, the water you can drink. It's been cleaned, it's been purified, you're able to drink it safely and know that you'll be healthy. But once that pollution or contamination, you can kind of use them in the same way. So once something's contaminated, it might have something harmful in it. So it's just a way of describing that things are not exactly the safest for you.
Awesome. Thanks for defining that. And you know what, speaking about being solutions oriented, like you mentioned earlier, and about our viewers being able to make those changes, they're sharing with us some great ways to solve some of those problems, to make those pictures not happen. We have Charlize sharing that she's going to work on not throwing trash in the streets or near the ocean and things like that. We also have Isabella, who's going to help work on taking the trash out of the sea, which I believe Mr. Garcia talked about a few weeks back with his robotic invention.
That's right. That's right. Using those different inventions or coming up with new ideas. All of these things are so related, right? When we talk about innovation, trying to change undo some of those human behaviors that we've done, right? They're coming up with
right. A couple more too. One of our viewers mentioned cleaning up after the pets. We know that that can cause challenges as well, and also participating in the beach cleanup.
Definitely. So we just have a new puppy that's joined our family, and I know that every day I have to go outside, or my daughters have to go outside, and they have to pick up whatever our little Roxy does. And so we want to make sure we do it daily so that we're not missing any of it, so that it doesn't end up somewhere else, polluting or contaminating anything that might be downstream from us or in our area, right? So that's one small thing you can do. It takes what, merely seconds just to do that and make a change. So we can make changes really big or smaller changes day by day. That's awesome. I love it, Mr. Bruder.
Well, Mrs. Bystrak, speaking of all this knowledge that they're sharing with us, I think they're ready to show it off in this Kahoot game.
Okay, sounds great. So I'm going to go ahead and get it started. So let's go ahead and get started about protecting our watersheds. All right, so our first question is asking you, I said this word several times, it's asking, what is a watershed? So what is a watershed? Is it a red triangle, a shed that holds water? Is it yellow circle, an area of land that drains into a body of water? Is it blue diamond, a lake or a river? Or is it green square, a tropical storm? Let's give you those options again. So I want to know, what is a watershed? Is it red triangle, a shed that holds water? Is it yellow circle, an area of land that drains into a body of water? Is it blue diamond, a lake or a river? Or is it green square, a tropical storm? All right, couple more seconds. I'm seeing all those answers come in. Let's find out what the definition is here of what is a watershed. It was an area of land that drains into a body of water. Looks like many of you got that correct. So awesome job. Let's go ahead and see. Looks like we have our friend Purple Badger in the lead. Purple Badger was probably pretty quick on answering. Now question 2. Which of the following are included in a watershed? So what's included when we talk about watersheds? Is it red triangle mountains and deserts? Is it yellow circle, land and air? Is it blue diamond, cities and farms? Or is it green square, all of the above? Again, let's try this one more time. Which of the following are included in a watershed? Is it red triangle, mountains and deserts? Is it yellow circle, land and air? Is it blue diamond, cities and farms? Or was it green square? All of those answers, so all of the above. Let's see how we did on this question. Looks like many of you, the majority of you, knew that it was all of these things: mountains and deserts, land and air, cities and farms. So if you answered any of those, you were actually correct, right? But we were going to include all of those with all of the above. Let's see if that changes our scoreboard here. We have Rockstar Crab in the lead. Now our third question. What can scientists and engineers use to demonstrate how something works? Is it red triangle, a tool? Is it yellow circle, a textbook? Is it blue diamond, a model? Is it green square, a compass? Again, what can scientists and engineers, just like you were today, use to demonstrate how something works? So we built a something of a watershed. Is it red triangle, a tool, yellow circle, a textbook, blue diamond, a model, or green square, a compass? About 3 more seconds. I'm seeing those answers coming in. I love the participation. Looks like that they can use, scientists and engineers use these models or prototypes so that they can observe and demonstrate what might happen in a given situation. Awesome job there, awesome. It looks like on our scoreboard we have a new friend, we have Charming Ferret up in the lead. Question 4. Animal waste, factories, cities, and farms all contribute to watershed blank. So what would we fill in the blank there? Is it red triangle, pollution? Is it yellow circle, food? Is it blue diamond, boundaries? Or is it green square, health? So all of those different things that we put onto our watershed models, they helped contribute to the watershed what? Was it pollution? Was it yellow circle, food? Was it blue diamond, boundaries? Or was it green square, health? Did it contribute to the health of the watershed, the boundaries, the food, or the pollution? Again, remember all those different things: animal waste, factories, cities, farms, your pets, the plants. All of those things contributed to, very nice. Nice answers there. It looks like most of you, many of you said pollution. So very nice. So all of those things added and contribute to pollution. Now this final one is a poll, so there's no right or wrong answer here, but I really want to get you thinking about what is one thing that you will do to help protect our watersheds. Now I know Mr. Bruder shared a lot of those different things, so let's see, what are some of those things? Would you pick up trash, like red triangle? Would you pick up the trash? Would you yellow circle, reduce plastic use? Would you blue diamond, clean up after a pet? I know one friend already is going to answer that. Or would you green square, volunteer to clean an area like a river, a trail, or a beach? So what is one thing you will do? Not that you can do, but what's one thing you will do to help protect our watersheds? Go ahead and make your final selection there. And let's find out what some of you plan to do to help our watersheds. So we have it pretty spread across the board. We have friends willing to pick up trash, friends willing to clean up after their pets, friends willing to reduce their plastic use, so we don't even have that plastic in our watersheds. And I love how many of you will even go further, going to another area to clean up an area like a river, a trail, or a beach. There's lots of organizations where you can do that. So that's awesome. So let's find out who our winner was. It looks like in third place we have Funny Lizard. In second place we have Charming Ferret. And in first place, who is it? It looks like our first place, is a name we hadn't heard. It looks like Swift Pelican took the lead there. Awesome job on that, Kahoot. I'm so excited that you guys are all making these decisions to go ahead and help our environment in different ways and help protect our watersheds. I love it. I think I used the word watershed guardians earlier. Now, if you enjoyed today's event or you're looking to build and learn more about innovation, join us and visit our YouTube CVESD Innovation and Instruction YouTube channel. Go ahead and subscribe to it. There's lots of different activities and all our live events can be found there. Now, I want to invite you also, before we conclude, to join my friend, Mr. Rick Ramirez. He's going to be doing a health station live event next week, February 5th at 1 o'clock. So next week at the same time, and he's going to be doing or presenting a program called the Touchdown Toss. So please join him. It was exciting to see and hear all of those things that you guys are going to do to protect our watersheds. Now, with that, I'm going to say thank you. Have a great afternoon. Have a great weekend. And think about your actions every day because it does have an impact on our watersheds.